Episode 29 Design Company podcast. And we have as a guest today a friend, I dare say, Simon Barry, who is going to talk to us about kindness in business. That's the topic we want to stick to. But before we go into prodding that topic a little bit more, Simon, please tell us, who are you?
So I'm a man of many facets. I've got my fingers in blockchain, uh, personal development, mindset. Kindness is a big topic as well because that's what we're going to cover today. And mostly, I'm a business coach that really focuses on the internal operations of a company. So, how do you get from point A to point B in the most efficient, best way possible? And I've got that from the experience of working in corporate for nearly 20 years and also working with probably about 2,000 startups over the last 15 years. So it's kind of given me that nice balance between crazy corporate life and crazy startup life, which I think there's a lot to pull from and a lot of advantages of both.
So what's the purpose of the work that you do, and how does kindness play into that purpose?
Well, it was the real epiphany was me coming into the office miserable, opening my email and then seeing a barrage of tasks that I had to do. And that's not a kind or a nice way to go. And of course, as soon as people know you're in the office, they're on the phone wanting to know what's going on and what you're doing and have you read my email. And it's not a kind way of doing things. There's always a nicer, more decent way to do things where people collaborated more on solutions to problems rather than coming into the office to firefight. So I think that the kindness is not only how you treat yourself when you go into the office, but also how you treat your colleagues as well, because we spend 40, some of us 50, 60 hours in the office a week. It's more than we spend anywhere else in the world. We need to have a better way of working where we're not only kind to ourselves but kind to others around us, and it just makes a much better working atmosphere, in my
I
opinion.
just I just want to rebound on what you said, Simon. telling something to Jason earlier and I'd forgotten it, but I just remembered it thanks to what you said. It's all about moving from a culture of blame to a culture of learning and just saying, hey, this thing is not working. Let's collectively figure out how to make it better instead of trying to find the person responsible and then sanction them for it.
Absolutely. Far too much finger pointing in business. And what it becomes is a way of almost you're siloed where you're too scared to make a mistake and too scared to screw up. So you try and do the minimum possible or the minimum impact and shove it along. And that creates a very dysfunctional working environment. And that kind of fear means you're probably not working to your optimal. But the inverse of that is that collaboration where it's a pleasure to work with your colleagues, it's a pleasure to make your customers happy. It's brilliant. And one of the things I always try to do is when I was managing people is tell people they've done a good job. And it sounds like such a small little thing, but people were oh, thank you very much, and that's amazing. And that kind of feedback kind of builds those positive habit loops as well, because if they know they've done a great job and you've treated them nicely, it's great, because there's far too much shouting and negativity. So it's really just turning things on its head and appreciate the good days. There will be more of them, and there will be bad days, don't get me wrong, but have the right mindset about it where you can actually go and have a better day and deal with things collectively and responsibly, so that the business can still thrive, because you learn more when things are in a down phase than you do when they're going fabulously well.
So what do you think, Mo, we should ask him about people? While he's thinking about it, I'm gonna chuck one in, which is, what is the role of kindness when you're managing people? How does kindness help you manage people better?
Yeah, well, it's very important, because people often treat it like a number. You're just an employee. You come in, you do your work, you carry on. But if you treat people with kindness, you understand that they're people and might have had a bad day, or they've had a terrible commute into the office, or they've rushed their breakfast or whatever. And going into that with a different mindset of kindness actually generates a better atmosphere with your subordinates, with the people who report to you, plus the people who you report to. It's very important to have that on the outset, because if you're coming in with the mindset of I haven't had my coffee, I'm really tired, I'm really irritable, oh my goodness, there's 400 emails that are all urgent, I've got to deal with them, the phone's going, you're not going to put yourself in the best mood. If you think of that kindness mindset when you go in, and that's how you start, then it can often diffuse a lot of situations where people are irritated. I often, and I must admit, it almost sounds like a bit of a bribe, but I'll often bring biscuits or cakes into the office. And it's a small thing, but it's that kindness. It's like, I appreciate you. Here's, there's some stuff in the kitchen to help yourself, because it's about putting a smile on people's faces, even if it's a small smile. It really helps, because when things do go wrong, then people will go that extra mile. People will stay a few hours late. But if they're not, and you just treat them like they're a number, or you got to wring as much work out of them as possible in as short a time as possible, then they're not going to stand up to the plate for you. And that's what it is. If you want a high productivity company, that people come in with smiles on their faces, you have to take personal responsibility for that. And that's where that kindness comes in. And I think it has to go from the very top. And you have to take responsibility and do that.
I like what you said, Simon, right? Because I think, generally speaking, with this trend of like yoga, meditation, chief happiness officers, it's like we say in love, right? It's not about one big declaration, it's sustained, repeated action, right? And so you said you have to start from the top. I agree. I think it's also personality. And what I've learned recently is that personality is nothing less than sustained action. So if I say, yeah, I like sports, but I don't really exercise ever, it's not really my personality, just something I'm saying. If I'm running Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, okay, I like exercise. That's my personality, right? But obviously, you are the inspirational leader, being kind to everyone. How do you make sure that people are kind in a systematic way? Because systems today can be quite unfair, unkind, and human. How do you ensure that not just that you're creating wellness for your employees, but also that they are systematically creating wellness amongst each other? And I think this is the key question, because it's very easy to do kind of top down, making them happy. But then when you're, out and away, how do they sustain and grow that seed that you've planted?
Yeah,
this is a question of the month so far, I would say. So Mo, tap yourself on the back, bruv.
There you go. To me, it's all about corporate culture. You have to have that environment that exists within the company, so that if you are absent, then the good ideas, the good flow, the good atmosphere is still there when you're not there. So many times I've seen an inspirational leader who is the hub of all the decisions leave and everything collapses, and that's not necessarily a good leader. That's more of a automaton, right? There's someone who top-down leadership approach, and they may be kind and wonderful about it, but that doesn't help the company, because you're there to nurture and help people grow. So you have to be empowering. You have to have that atmosphere where the culture is good enough, where that people know that it's okay to step up to the plate. It's okay to make those decisions. It's okay to do it. If you keep people in this tight net where they're not allowed to do things, or they're always looking to you, then you're creating restriction right off the bat, and that really doesn't help in terms of company culture. So it has to be done very mindfully from the get-go. I don't think you have to enshrine this in a lot of process and procedure, because you can bog things down, but you have to say, look, I trust you, I empower you, so that if I'm away, you are responsible and you're able to do things. And a lot of the things to do is, there may be mistakes, things may go wrong, not having that blame culture as well. So I think that's really crucial, because things will go wrong, whether you're responsible or somebody else is. But if you have a nice culture where if something goes wrong, let's analyze it, look at it, and figure out how, as a whole company, we can get better at moving forward while not pointing fingers. And that pointing fingers things comes from a culture, not necessarily a process and procedure thing. And it's how you approach. So that will inform how your HR hires the next person. That will inform how you interview. That will inform how you behave within your office. And these things will come part of the culture. So I'll go back to my biscuits and cakes thing. You could have those. I've seen companies do that on a Friday, where they might have a glass of wine or a beer on a Friday, just to help people mingle and get those conversations going. There are things you can do as a company to do that, but really you have to be very mindful of the type of people you're bringing in and the type of culture you're bringing in, because someone who has the wrong mindset, or is very selfish, or doesn't want to be kind and doesn't want to give, can really upset a company. So when I hire, I will obviously hire on, have they got the skills and ability to do this, but I'm very particular on who I'll hire based on the culture and what impact they'll bring to it, because it's a team, and you have to make sure that people are good team players first, rather than do they tick all the boxes in terms of what they can do.
Yeah, it goes back to that like attitude, not aptitude sort of statement, which sometimes sounds a bit like a sort of cliche truism, but actually it's really, really absolute fact. So in terms of innovation, then, what is the impact of kindness on innovation, and how does innovation happen in a kinder workspace?
Okay. Well, for me, innovation is crucially about being bold and courageous. If we're reticent, if we're holding back, we're not being creative, we're not being inventive. So having that culture and empowerment where people can put their hand up and say, I've got a great idea, or I'd like to try this, or how about we do it this way, that creates the atmosphere where people are listened to, ideas can be tried, and if they go wrong, they're not blamed if they go wrong. So it all goes back for me to the culture where people can stand up. And that's why startups can be seen as quote unquote innovative, because everyone pitches in and everyone wears different hats and everyone does things. It's no real secret how it works. And that's why it gets lost in bigger corporate cultures, because everyone's siloed and everyone has their roles and everyone can't say this and I can't comment on what so-and-so is doing and whatever. But if you open the doors up and have the ability where anyone can come up with ideas, I always go back to the story about Ford. And Ford Motor Company took all the senior managers off on a big trip, all expenses paid, and asked them come up with ideas to make our company better. I think over a course of 5 days, they came up with something like 30 ideas. Great, brilliant ideas. They asked their people on the shop floor. Within about half a day, they came up with about 300 ideas, because they're the people physically doing the work. It shows you have to use these things here. You have to use your ears. You really have to listen, and you have to be open to that flexibility. And that flexibility comes from having a strong corporate culture where it's okay to say, have we tried this? Can we try that? And that's for me where it comes from.
So in terms of products, then, how do products benefit from kindness? Is there a kindness impact on product development and perhaps even product design in your experience, Simon?
I would think so. I think the word that springs to mind is responsible. You have to have that responsible design. You can have design that's functional, or that's cost cutting, or that fits in the purpose, or you can have this open, more expansive way of saying, I'll design my products in this way. I'll listen to my user base. I'll be flexible in terms of my approach. I'll have this. I mean, I'm a big fan of iteration, where we build quickly, we fail fast, we iterate, we test, we learn, and we build those feedback loops in. Because if you build those, you're able to design a better product more quickly and iron out all the little kinks and problems. And you do that by listening. That's what it is. Listen to your user base, listen to the people building the product, listen to the people testing the product. Go and talk to your client services who are at the forefront and getting these issues or problems coming back. So often as a business, we are closed off and we think our product's perfect and it's out there in the ether, and it must be user error, or it must be something else, or everything's absolutely fine, or it's no problem, or it must be a quirk here. Open your mind and open your eyes and actually see that there's always an improvement you can make. And the thing is perspective here. If you put yourself in the perspective of the customer and think about their wants and needs, because we're very often fall into that trap of thinking about your own profit margins and maybe there's some of the technical issues behind it and maybe the design decisions behind it. Put yourself in that customer perspective and think about it from what issues are you trying to solve, what problems are you trying to get over, what do they like, what don't they like, and it kind of changes your perspective on things. And then you think, okay, I want to make it a joy. I mean, Apple is very good at this because they try and just make things simple and minimalist, and that's how they try and twist it from a customer point of view. And that's what you need to do with a product, is just think about customer and think about usage and think about it, and again, inject that kindness and joy into it. What you're trying to do, what you're trying to engage, what kind of experience you're trying to give people. You see things that are over designed and over engineered because you're in that process and you're in that phase and you're designing things and it's all exciting, but you're not thinking about the end user coming into it without seeing the product or its purpose or its why and how they approach and think of it. Let's be kind about this. Let's nurture them. Let's make it a joyful, happy experience. Let's make them love this. Let's give it those feelings, and you know, have a love for your product. Have a real joy about it, because instead of just going out there and say this is our next cash cow or this is something that's going to make us a ton of money, have it inspire joy in people, because I guarantee it will probably make even more money if people love your product rather than it saves me a bit of money.
What tends to just one thing there. What tends to happen in corporates? I've seen what happens in corporates where the opposite approach is taken, where effectively the corporate company that has got really terrible products, they start getting feedback from the customers that start saying that the product doesn't work, right? It's terrible. And the corporate, instead of actually fixing the issues, they start actually calling the customers stupid, fools, idiots. These people don't know anything, blah blah blah. And that's like an extreme anti-pattern and the opposite of what you were saying, Simon. But that can also creep in like smaller amounts, and it's kind of just a little squeeze of toxicity, right? And then if you bring in more people and they start squeezing in a little bit more toxicity, before you even know, everyone's going, oh, these people out there are so stupid, and it's like, it's the same stupid people that are buying Apple products at 10 grand a pop. Right? But Apple have cared for them, and literally they have Apple Care, which also costs an arm and a leg, but people are happy to buy that because, hey, Apple is kind to the customer.
Absolutely. And what it's all about, yeah. And it doesn't take much for those things to creep in, because it just takes a different mindset or a different person coming in with a different perspective, or you're very right, for someone to go and have less care about the user experience. And that's why open communication and trust and respect within the company, where you're actually talking to your clients and getting those feedback and actually acting on it, rather than just saying, oh no, they're silly, they don't know what they're doing, they haven't implemented it right, or they're holding it wrong, or they keep pressing the wrong buttons. No, take that personally and deeply care, so that you're able to affect it properly. You can show that you care about your customers, because they'll love you back, and it's a wonderful thing when that happens. It's not easy. It is hard work, because putting yourself in the mindset of your customers and going this extra mile can sometimes affect your profit margins. But longer term, it's much more powerful, because you create much more stickiness for your customers and potentially much more profit. So I would highly recommend that caring approach is at the heart of your business and the heart of your decisions, because you will massively reap the rewards.
I mean, I was actually going to ask you a question next, Simon, on the money side, right? And so, you've obviously got different things that you see in your career. So it's a two-pronged question. Maybe if you can tell me, because I think what you said about implementing kindness, it's all about culture and DNA. And then whatever you do fans out from there, right? And so just having people be decent humans takes a long time. It takes selection. It's not necessarily a cost in itself. It's more like getting around. But then what I'd like you to tell us is maybe two different business stories. One which is like, let's say, a really exponential outcome that you saw in creating a fitness, maybe a new product idea, someone who really moved the project to the next level, one time where that really helped something grow. And also on the flip side, a more negative experience you've seen of companies where just hubris was really too much there, and so it cost them a lot. Because, Jason was mentioning small doses of toxicity earlier. I think it's also on the other side, it's, nourishing the small doses of an idea that could become something, or picking up on the very early traces of something that's going to become a problem immediately, because you're practicing empathy, rather than 6 months down the line when you're firing people because you can't pay them anymore. So yeah, if you can just one outcome sort of story, exponential, and one which is like really terrible, entertaining and useful.
I'll start off with a terrible one first, because it's good to end on a high. so I worked in a company that had a terrible, toxic culture, which was very blame orientated. So whenever we had board meetings, it was tons of shouting, tons of finger pointing, tons of problems. Now, at no point did we even discuss any of the customer issues. And when the customer issues came up, the client services department were blamed for not communicating with the customers properly. So it was this very much blame culture, and everything was directed by numbers. We want to grow 20% in the next quarter, and it never did. It never did, because everything was all internal. So two problems arose from this. One, massive amounts of customer turnover. So people were always fighting to get extra customers on board. Two, massive amount of staff turnover, which meant internal chaos. So for the ones of us who stayed around, there was always an extra set of training, which means you're always 5 or 10 steps behind, because you did that pool of expertise there. And having or even changing any kind of corporate culture became very difficult and very toxic. And to be honest, the company didn't last. That was a bad story, where right from the very top, right through, to survive in an atmosphere like that, you had to be ruthless. You had to cover your back. You had to not try and be working on something when it blew up, because you'd get the flack, even though it might not be your problem. So that's a good example of a toxic atmosphere that can spiral out of control.
If you happen to cheer us up with
on the flip side, I've worked in a company that had a very inclusive atmosphere. Everyone was respected, everyone's opinion was important, and someone from client services came up with a new product idea. They got this idea off their own initiative. They got this idea by talking to customers and clients, and they wrote a fantastic report. They knocked on the door of the MD, popped to the MD. 2 weeks later, the software guys had written the product. We did a little competition internally to come up with a name. Someone came up with a fabulous name, who was, I think at the moment, they worked in cleaning. They got a nice little prize for it. The product was launched. It became our biggest seller. Everyone felt this collective responsibility for not only creating but inventing something, and everyone knew that they could stand up and say, oh, I've got this idea. And we didn't mind who came up with the idea. It was important that an idea was brought up, it was evaluated between us all, and we openly discussed it. There was no I'm senior to you or you're subordinate, whatever. It was brilliant, and everyone had good fun. The atmosphere there was very work hard, play hard. We socialize with each other inside of work, outside of work. People had big smiles on their faces. People didn't mind if you rolled in a bit late because of the trains. The atmosphere was great, and they did some stats on us, because I think they eventually sold the company. We were something like 11 times more productive per person than the company who acquired us. And the reason was because of the atmosphere, and that atmosphere came from the very top, because it was very open, very collaborative. You could move around easily. It was very good, and the company made a ton of money. So that is a good example of a complete flip, where there's less control, seemingly less procedures, but it wasn't chaotic. It was actually extremely productive and actually had a good financial reward on the flip side.
Amazing. And so what is the impact of kindness on growth of companies? I gave an example of a big corporate client I worked with, and they acquired in the telecoms business, and they acquired a smaller telecoms company that had a much more sort of startup kind of culture, and they brought them into the same building. And so you would go to this other part of the building where the other acquired company was. You kind of go from the main telecoms client, and it's it's like a morgue in there, and you walk into this acquired company, and then suddenly it's like a playful startup-y kind of vibe. Everyone's like, hey, would you like a coffee? And the other person's like, yeah, sure, I'll have a tea as well, bring me some biscuits, all that kind of stuff. And it's like, whoa, the difference is massive. What's the impact of kindness on growth?
Well, it has a massive impact, because it means you're more open, and you're more flexible, and you're more able to do things. Your example is perfect, and I've come across similar examples where that kind of startup-y, again, it's in inverted commas, because I think it's much more of a mindset than a size of a company atmosphere, can actually create an atmosphere of much more collaboration, much more relaxed, and conversely much more invention and creativity. And that kind of thing is infectious, because people who come into that atmosphere kind of get swept up in it and know that they don't have to hide. They can be themselves, they can show their character, they can smile, but also they can express themselves. And people who are allowed to express themselves in business, rather than feeling they have one or two hands tie behind their back tend to grow. And if you grow in a company, the company grows with you, and that's really important to have. So that kindness, not only to your staff, but also to your customers and clients, can have a massive effect. As I mentioned before, telling people they've done a good job, or sending out a Christmas hamper to your best clients, things like that. Small little acts of kindness can have massive effects on things like loyalty, or things like people tolerating it more when things break. One of my early careers was actually on the phone dealing with people who were trading, and Muggins here had to ring these people up when the trading system went down. Now, these people were angry if they had to ring me. But believe me, they were very kind if I explained, and I was very kind, and I gave them a solution for the problem. Now, clearly, the system being down, whether I rung them or they rung me, was the same result. But the fact that I led with kindness and I was giving them a problem, but telling them how I'd solve it and treated them with respect, meant that the next time we spoke, it was much nicer. So how overcome? If you wrap that with kindness, wrap that in cotton wool, put a nice little bow on top of it, then you'll find that solutions are much easier, that people's tolerance is much better, and therefore your ability to go and express that kindness is much nicer. And therefore, going back to your point about company growth, your potential company growth can be a lot better as well.
I like what you said, Simon. There's a saying I appreciate: a rising tide brings up all the boats, right? And so very often we think about growth, it's like, oh, how can I grow? How can I grow? But actually what you realize is, as you said, instead of just like trying to take the most out of your people, is giving to them and bringing everyone you up. So kind of another way that I put it, for example, I have like one of our country managers in Nigeria, right? In Anya. He's an awesome guy, right? And I keep telling him, dude, if you make more money than me, even though I'm the president of the company, I am happy, because that means that, I've created a job where someone's really making a happy life. If he's getting super well paid, I'm probably also getting very well paid. So even if he makes more than me, I don't care, because collectively we're all rising together, right? And so I think this is kind of the key thing to kind of take from kindness. It's really not just like being kind individually, but collectively seeking to elevate ourselves.
Absolutely.
End of my philosophical inspiration.
No, it's a very important point, and that collective responsibility, and if I do well, you do well. That if that permeates around the business, it can have a real magical effect. And that's it. What it is it's about not being selfish. If you're open to what, they may earn more than me, or they may go out there and win these deals and get more commission. It's fine, because I know that when the company does well, that I'll get a bonus or whatever it is. It's when the company starts being selfish about it and starts changing the rules or flipping things around, that you can create an atmosphere that might have been kind in the past, but can often start flipping and start changing. That's where these little things can creep in and people create bad feelings. So I've always found, especially in companies, being very, very open and honest about what happens and why. And even if it's this department's going to get a big bonus because of this reason, right? And this department's going to have a pay rise for this reason, but I'm afraid this can't happen because of this reason. But don't worry, when things turn, this will happen. And too often companies can hide behind things, secrecy, and I won't tell you what's going on, or it's just happened for a reason. But business is business, and people at the end of the day are reasonable people. As long as you are not trying to squeeze every ounce of them and try and pay them less than they're worth, and you treat them like human beings, then it's all good. Everything will, as you say, rise, and the boats will rise, and the tide will rise, and everything is all awesome and magical, because you've put kindness at the heart of things, not profit. And oddly enough, the profit will still grow when you put kindness at the heart and take your eye off the ball and put it on the kindness instead. The profit will grow anyway, in a nicer way.
So for anyone who's listening to this, please pop in the comments of this podcast what caught your ear the most from Simon today, because there's so many little nuggets there that we're definitely going to have to snip this out and repurpose it. But one other thing to really highlight here is that Anya Design Company software literally works on all these principles of caring for the opinions of every single employee inside your company, and then it bubbles them back up to the management and executive layer of the company and enables the management and executives to care for the employees in the way that they ought to be caring for their customers, kindly, inclusively, patiently, and in a well mannered fashion, so that money and growth happen naturally as a outcome of that appropriate style of management and so on. So for anyone who's looking for that standardized and automatic and consistent way of doing what Simon was talking about, we're more than happy to help you with our software and consultancy services and so on. Meanwhile, Simon, please tell us what kind of people or companies you're looking for and where can people connect with you at?
Yes, so my website is www.simonbarry.tv. People think I have a TV company, but maybe that is coming coming
You're
later.
a media personality, aren't you?
I am a media personality, so I think that fits quite well. In terms of companies, I'm open to talk to kind, decent people who want to grow their company, and crucially, who want to learn. There are plenty of people out there who have hit a roadblock, or have a challenge, or know that they need to change, or have a big ambition and need to grow, and I can help guide them to their next milestone. And you know, that is it's a magical thing, because there are smiles all around, and even better, the profits increase, which is exactly what you want.
Awesome. Simon, thank you so much for joining us. And, you know, I got massive respect for you. And I'm sure Brother Mo shares my opinion now that he's taken you through the design company wheel here. And what do you think, Mo? Is it good or bad guy? What do you think? Should we be kind to him? And the closing comments.
Well, I think Simon is a perfect example of the kind of directors of companies you want to be working with. Essentially, you understand that it's all about having those shared values, and that being director does not make you God. It just makes you more responsible for making sure everyone makes it through to the next step.
Absolutely. It's all, you know, the big epiphany for me was you can smile, you can have a good time, you can be kind, and you can not be selfish and still make money in your company. And it's a win-win-win for everyone. And that's the way forward, I think.
So I concluded then on Simon is a perfect kind of director. Thank you very much, Simon.
Hey. My pleasure.